Exactly, which is great, right? Good mix.
We already started to discuss.
I know.
I think it's very interesting to see also the other side.
Yes.
No, I feel a little bit.
Welcome everyone.
Thank you.
Welcome everyone.
Actually have it, yeah.
One of the last program points is the Art Week. Friday is the last day, and I'm very pleased that we have a very eclectic, very beautiful minds on our last panel here on current dynamics in the international art world. And I'm really pleased that you are hanging on in this cold atmosphere, but I hope we have a heated debate. I hand over to Julia Hartmann, who also co-curated this exhibition. And it's a pleasure to have really beautiful minds on the panel, and looking forward to learn from you and really come to a close of Vienna Art Week 2021. Thanks for joining, and have a great discussion.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Robert, and also a warm welcome from my side. As you know, we're going to discuss the hot topics of the art world today. In the last 2 years, many things have changed. And I'm really glad that we have these very stellar panelists who will discuss these changes with us today. And I'm going to introduce them quickly. I'm going to introduce them quickly, then I'm going to ask them, all of them to give a short statement on their view on the changes of the last 2 years. Then I have prepared some questions, and then of course you're also welcome to ask our panelists some questions at the end. So right next to my left is Ben Gentili. Ben is a London-based artist and founder of the Robert Ellis Project, a studio that aims to promote blockchain culture within the visual arts. Ben has worked across the art world internationally in London, Hong Kong and Vancouver. Most recently he has focused his energy more creatively on developing blockchain's visual culture. And one of the first works, Portraits of a Mind, I think you're going to talk about it also later, is the first work of art from the project and was made solely by Ben over the course of 3 years. And it is a global art project to decentralize Bitcoin's code base into 40 fragments. The work is currently globally decentralized to 15 cities on 4 continents, from San Francisco to Tokyo. And he also launched the project at Christie's New York, and that has been widely credited as one of the major events behind the subsequent rapid growth in the NFT space. So Ben is really an expert on NFT, and I'm looking forward to him to explain a little bit about blockchain and NFT, because I think we also can learn a little bit about it. Right next to him is Louise Deininger. Louise is an African conceptual artist, author and life coach based in Vienna. Her artwork focuses on consciousness, spiritual science, human and self and personal development, self-leadership, critical thinking and identity. Her work explores how we humans relate to the world around us, our connection to the universe, and what interventions we can take in our environment in order to live in harmony within and without. She is president of Geico Academy, that works together with African youth from post-conflict societies to develop and strengthen their diverse individual and collective interests. And she's also the co-president of the VBKÖ, which is the Association of Women Artists in Vienna. And she's also represented in the exhibition right here, so you can also see it during the talk. Next to her is Chess Konatsa. Chess is an independent digital and augmented reality art curator focused on community building and artist-first cultural programming. Her curatorial practice explores human behavior and identity in relationship with the age of the internet. Konatsa is a chief curator for the Crypto and Digital Art Fair, CADAF, Kadaf, and Digital Art Month, a contributing curator for Infinite Objects, and an ArtPay board member, and founded and organizes a curatorial concept studio since 2017 called Studio As We Are, that works to cultivate, support, and advance voices in new media. And she's also the initiator of Digital Art Month, that showcases an array of dynamic, interactive, and sculptural site-specific augmented reality effects throughout October in New York City. This festival is a celebration of the historic neighborhoods of New York, matched with the creativity of augmented reality artists. And of course, we're also going to talk about this today. Next to her is, here we are, Jochen Kienzle. Jochen is a collector and former gallerist based in Berlin. He is the head of the Jochen Kienzle collection, through which he collects and represents art since the 1980s. One focus of the collection is the art of the 1970s from the USA, and especially in New York, as the art scene in New York of that time shaped his view. In order to preserve and to grow his collection, Jochen founded the Kienzle Art Foundation, thereby following his mission as a mediator. It is the declared aim of the Kienzle Art Foundation to rediscover marginalized or quasi-forgotten artistic positions from the 1960s and to make them available to succeeding generations. Jochen also regularly organizes exhibitions and lends the works from the collection to exhibitions around the world. From these impulses, a large proportion of women artists were included in the collection from the beginning, which I think is also nice to mention. And last but not least, Gregor Podner. Gregor is the owner of Berlin-based gallery Gregor Podner, established in 2003, that represents internationally renowned artists and actively collaborates with various international galleries, institutions, and publishing houses. As curator, Gregor has been working internationally since the mid-1990s, and the gallery's program has developed out of his endeavors in the curatorial field of contemporary art. Beginning with an European focus over the last decade, the gallery reached out to a wider international context and directed a strong part of its mission also to art of the modernist past, highlighting a natural link between contemporary and modern art. And Gregor was, amongst others, the curator of the third U3, the Triennale of Contemporary Slovene Art in 2000. And as he just mentioned to me right now, he's going to relocate his gallery from Berlin to Vienna. So I think this is also going to be an interesting talking point later on. So this was the introductory part. And now I'm going to ask Ben for a statement about the changes in the last 2 years. Thank you.
Hello. I guess I actually want to discuss something that happened last night, which I think is nothing about me. I was not part of it at all, but I think probably best demonstrates, since kind of crypto and NFTs began, the importance of crypto, the blockchain as a tool for online self-organization, and I think what will become seen as probably the most revolutionary moment in terms of the history of crypto in the art world. And I don't know if anyone follows auctions, but last night at Sotheby's, a manuscript which was the 13th known version of the US Constitution was put up for sale. And normally these kind of manuscripts are the purview of either major museums or very deep-pocketed elite collectors, and it was valued at about $15 to $20 million. And a group of online pranksters decided to self-organize on the blockchain using a structure called a DAO. And there are a number of big DAOs that run crypto art collections now. A DAO stands for something called a decentralized autonomous organization, and that effectively is a kind of collective that lives on the blockchain and that can use smart contracts and cryptocurrency in order to self-govern in a very efficient way. And so from 5 corners of the internet, these different Twitter handles with personalities from across the States and Europe who'd never met each other decided to open up a DAO. And they set up a Twitter feed. None of them had ever collected a work of art before. In the process of 3 hours, they set up the DAO. They set up an LLC registered in the US, and then took to Twitter, deciding that they were going to try and bid and buy a $20 million manuscript in 5 days' time. They had no money between them. And using the internet, or at least using Twitter, and also using the Ethereum ecosystem, within the end of the day 2, they'd raised $2 million. And as the story spread further throughout the press, they'd raised nearly $42 million in 5 days. And all of this was done trustlessly on the blockchain without need of any verifying third party. The money was held in an escrow account on the blockchain. You didn't have to send your money to a bank. There was no KYC needed at all. And then last night they started bidding. And as the price climbed, they pushed the bidding all the way up to 41 million. And there's just this idea that this document, which is probably, I would say, one of the most important political documents for the organization of people and common rights. I mean, it starts "We the People," was being bid on by a group of people from, I think something like 45 different countries, none of whom who knew each other, and they'd all crowdfunded their resources together. They ended up losing, sadly. There are still very, very rich, elite people in the world. But I think this will become to seen as one of the major shifting points in the idea that our cultural artifacts now, previously the purview of well-funded institutions and private collectors, can now be bid on by the people. And for me, this is probably the most latent example of what crypto will do in terms of the self-organization of our cultural production over the next 15 to 20 years.
So actually, Julia, thank you so much for having invited me to Yes, Julia, thank you so much for having invited me to join this panel of experts. I was just telling Jess, I'm just an artist. I don't think I would call myself an expert. However, I'm going to touch on the topic of what has changed in Vienna and around the world due to the climate change and the corona crisis, just to answer what you had asked me. Because I think climate change and the corona pandemic both are interchangeable, because one affects the other, and what more, both are social issues due to human behavior mainly. So as a result, in Vienna and across the globe, we see artists, art critics, art theorists, curators work on this topic that reflect on the environment, climate change, and corona pandemic. And we see more and more exhibitions in independent spaces, museums, and art institutions centered around this topic, now more than ever, including open calls for artist residencies which focus on this theme. Starting from where we are here today in the House of Losing Control, we have more than 80 artists whose works are also centered on this theme, and we've had more than, I think, 2,000 visitors since this started. Yes, and so we've also been able to see change, especially during lockdown, where the art scene explored other different means upon which they could exhibit their work and show the work through digital space, like what Jess we were talking about, augmented reality and stuff. Yeah, so also online festivals, art festivals that speak on this topic of climate change and the pandemic. On a personal level, a group of artists and students at the Academy of Fine Arts, Vienna, were chosen to work on a topic called Undoing Landscape, which was curated by Adam Simchik. I'm sure you all know Adam Simchik, the curator of Documenta 14. Yes, he's also my mentor. And so we worked together on this project. And this happened right in the middle of the pandemic. And we actually intended to have the exhibition, live exhibition. And so we had to find creative ways. Actually, Lisa, one of the artists who was part of this project, is here. So we had to find creative ways in which we could showcase this work. And so we settled upon having our works displayed on windows such that the public were able to view the works from the streets. And this happened at the Erste Foundation and also at Exhibit. So I also participated in an online exhibition in Prague called Isolation Art, which had artists from over 30 countries across the globe, and this also took part online. And also I participated in a digital festival in Lahore in Pakistan, and this was through augmented reality, and also we had artists from about 40 countries from around the globe. So in our association, I'm also the co-president of VBKO, an association that really deals with queer feminist activism. And we planned an exhibition actually during this time. And this exhibition, Julia was actually one of the curators in the team. And it also focuses on this theme, and it is called The Porthole. And actually, I'm glad to say that the exhibition is ongoing until December. So I was also invited to contribute to a collective by an artist friend and film director, Stephanie Winter, and her colleague, Nora Meyer. And it is centered around ecofeminism. And I got the privilege to also act in one of their films. And they're also part of the Vienna Art Week, and this will go on until December. So looking at all this, we acknowledge that climate change and the corona crisis are social issues that affect us all, regardless of whether we are artists or in the art scene, which means that we have all been forced to take action and engage in amplifying solutions that are beyond the scientific solutions, whose tools, techniques, methodologies, strategies, and findings most of our power structures depend on. We have seen many citizens waiting for politicians to provide solutions and answers around these issues. However, currently, the public is beginning to get really, really tired, and especially in Austria. I'm sure you all agree with me that everybody is really getting tired with this. In other words, social movements created by art through artists have always had the unique ability to move people to start looking at current issues that affect them from a different perspective. We all know that art has the ability to convey a message to the public that is beyond scientific language and can wake us up to look at different realities. Art provokes thought and allows for feelings to be impacted, and can also move people to take massive action in mitigating against issues that affect their lives.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you, everyone from Vienna Art Week, for having me here. Yeah, I think it's, you guys hear me? Okay.
Speak up.
I will speak up. Sorry. Okay. Better? I can take it?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll do that. That's fun.
Free time.
No, thank you. I'm just gonna go like this and my notes. Yeah, I need those today. I know, now I have lots of hands full. Thank you so much for having me here, Julia. It's been great to meet you in Vienna Art Week. Thank you guys so much for bringing me here from New York and finding me because of a art newspaper article after our Digital Art Month in Paris over the summer. So it's really exciting to be here. It's my first time here. It's a beautiful city and everyone's been great. So to answer your question and to open, I'm going to talk more about my work and how it's changed pre-pandemic up until now and what we've done because of the pandemic. So again, my work has always been about community building. I work to cultivate, support, and advance voices in new media. This comes to life through online and offline based cultural programming and public art initiatives. And I'm super focused on providing resources and connections and platforms for the artists that I work with and the roster of artists that we've created over the last 7 to 10 years through the partners that I work with that are also a global roster of artists thanks to social media platforms like Instagram and the connection that allows us to have with them. So pre-pandemic, again, hybrid experience has always been a part of my work, but pre-pandemic, my work was very focused on experiential and immersive, like IRL experiences. I was super obsessed with creating space for digital art in public quarters like Times Square and projection mapping studios like Loom or Lightbox in New York City. We really wanted to get the work off of your iPhone, off of Instagram, and create like a larger than life canvas for people to view this art that's otherwise thought of as Instagram like snackable content from content creators and treat it like it is fine art and it's worth viewing and looking at. So we spent a lot of time making that happen pre-pandemic. And then, of course, the lockdown happened, which ruined all of those live event plans for us because we had to stop. So during the early days of lockdown, an obvious shift towards online programs became super pertinent to maintain any sort of workflow for us. So we shifted back online. We started the CADAF online digital art fair, and that is really when I, as a curator who was really more focused on experiential and public art programming that was commission-based, wanted to focus more on helping the artists actually create kind of like a gateway or tangible format of their video art that could potentially be sold to a collector, because this still at that time, like early days of the pandemic, NFTs weren't the hype at that point. So we had CADAF online. We worked with Infinite Objects. I created a curated collection of video prints with Her Visions, that is a UK-based curatorial studio that is focused on creating space for female and female-identifying artists. And that kind of launched like our first initiative around like actually selling digital art to collectors, which was very exciting. And then after partnering with with CADAF Online, this is what led to our Digital Art Month initiative. And like Julia said, Digital Art Month is an augmented reality and video art festival that we worked on to launch in early October 2020. We really wanted to partner with the city to create something that was super safe, that allowed people to socially distance and experience art. We really wanted to get the large roster of artists that we work with around the world activated again and get their work out there and have the public have something to look forward to when all we could do was sit inside. So we partnered with the business improvement districts, we created public art space, we brought on sponsors, and we put up around 75 augmented reality artworks all over the city of New York, in Flatiron and Madison Avenue, in Soho, and other places, so that you could literally go on a self-guided tour through digitalartmonth.com, scan QR codes, and erect augmented reality art effects that were scalable and interact with the environment or the city streets itself, which became a really exciting and fun way to experience the art, and then was launched in other cities from Miami to Paris, and now we're going to Moscow in April of 2022. So that's what we're currently working on. And so because of the shift that we went through during the pandemic, we're very focused on digital art fairs, and we're working with a wide variety of art fairs like Moscow, and we just did a Christie's education course on NFTs. That was a short course. It literally just ended last week, and are really providing more resources for the artists we work with to learn how to mint their work and sell it to new collectors that are interested in buying it.
Thank you, Julia, for inviting me too, and I'm very happy to be here, and I like it to be here and to speak about what I do now, what happened in the pandemic time. I think it was very quiet in the foundation, but I think we had a chance to overthink about what we have done and what we should do, and so I invited a lot of artists, and we had a lot of talks what should happen now. I think in a time of let's say new technologies and a flood of pictures, and also in the internet, and I think everything is very difficult for me, because I really love painting, I really love sculpting, and for me I think digital development is very difficult, and I think it has not so much to do with art. I think art is something else. Art is individual, and I think we have to think it over and to think what the aims should be in the future. And I think we have to organize. I only can speak for the foundation, because we are not so international. Of course, we have a lot of international artists, but at least I think we have to go back to the roots, and we have to stress on contents again. And I think that for me it's very dangerous that a lot of market is always hyping artists and also forgetting artists, and I think that's why I think I'm not so I'm a very conservative perhaps, but I think it's necessary to think about what is now and to go back to correct also what also the museums also have to think about new programs. And I think the pandemic is also a chance to begin new and to think also, because of the climate change, of course. I think everything was too much. It was too much moving, traveling, and just slip the hand and say, okay, the fingers, and say, let's make a show in New York or somewhere else. And I think the pandemic is also a possibility to change, and we have to go forward, and we have to think about what we're doing, and that's what I try. Yeah. yeah, that's all I can say. I have no. Okay, we had also in the last time we had shows, but it was very, very difficult because one of the show was very good. Shows very the problem of the time. It was an artist. He really was thinking about production and what means to be artist and what is an art show. What is living in this content. Yeah, and I think, but the sad thing was that nobody came, nobody saw this show, but I don't want to make publicity, but this artist, he is also in Vienna. You can see him. He has a very good show, and in I don't know whether I think I may say that he is exposing in New York, at the gallery, and yeah. I think when you see this and when you see how he is reacting, what happened in the art world, I think he's protesting and he's also thinking about a new beginning, and he want to protect also the art. Yeah, that's all that I can say. May I pass?
Yeah, Jochen. Yeah, thank you very much for your invitation. I'm very pleased to be here in my new home. Just going to close my gallery in Berlin and run as soon as possible back to the city here, where just for the last 14 years. And during the 1.5 years now, the idea of the NFT market came also into my mind. Being a gallery owner of a space which is closed, and there is of course this technology bumped up into a broader sense, so to say. Of course, it's since years, of course, actual for insiders, as every tool, every technology, so to say. And we can mention, for instance, also like this, what I think it's striking, which is really like important to differentiate between art and the market, or so-called art market. And of art we have, and there is always a tool, and there is always like something like to mediate, and there is always the undiscovered and suppressed, and always the mainstream in everything what we do. And art is also, in this sense, it's also about decision-making. Cultural process is something to select, to say this is of value or this is of non-value. And this is of course also like the issue of the value is if an artwork or if a commodity has a certain value, does it mean that it's an important work of art or not? And this issue we have, for instance, now also with the NFT market. If something reaches so much of, let's say, value in sense of money value, does it mean that it's really an important work of art? And the same question I can put into my market where I'm working on is, for instance, like if a mainstream, if a blockbuster gallery is putting up an important artist, does it mean that this really like of importance, or is it just the market? Of course, I'm speaking now partly against my own profession, but I'm an art lover too. So I think this we have to take into account if we speak about the new technologies. That means what is necessary is to put up filters, is put up to the decision makers of a particular platform. It's like internet. Internet, it means everything, and it's not necessarily art because it's in the internet streams, or even if something is of mainstream, maybe it's not your part. Even if it's in the Pompidou, maybe it's not something what could be your value, or vice. It doesn't matter now. I think this is of importance that we differentiate between the art object, and the art object can be in whatever media. Even before the NFT market, we had digital media. So this is something which I think it has not to do with the idea of the new technology. And then we can also think about what kind of possibilities we have with new technology. That means that if, for instance, there is another market or there is this mass, let's say, another approach to imagery, maybe it could be possible also to set a platform where we could transform different kind of media into this new technology issue. But that's what I experience right now, of that what I've seen. I do not spend that much of time, I have to confess, into the new development until now. But what I see is, for my taste, not very elaborated. Maybe this I could also transfer maybe to my own field of interest right now, which is like the traditional art market. There I have also a few comments, but that's why I'm also not an important art gallerist of a mainstream issue. So this is what I can say now. Thank you.
Take it now. Thank you for this first statements, and I would just like to dig deeper a little bit into what you've already mentioned a little bit. And first of all, I'd like to start about the topic of new media like NFT. We've already talked about it a little bit, but I would like to know how you think that it influenced the art world, especially when, as a curator, as a gallerist, as a collector, as an artist, and also how you see how and if this new technology facilitates the access to art for the viewer and maybe also for the buyer, especially as I think for the NFT, the middleman is, as I understand, the middleman like galleries, like not necessary anymore. So I was wondering how you see this new way of showing and exhibiting and selling art.
I think the easiest way of describing or giving you an example that makes some sense is imagine if Picasso's Catalogue Raisonné, from the moment he made his first work, every single one of his works was online, viewable in one space. And viewable to everybody in the world, and no one could ever take it down. That's the kind of value as a public that you get with NFTs, and we can kind of devolve into arguments of aesthetics or quality, and I think on both sides there are very valid arguments. There are some great artists, there are some less good artists, there's some great work and there's some poor work. That's much the same as the traditional art world too. But I think the kind of radical transparency that the blockchain affords means that the public will, for the very first time in 50 to 100 years' time, have at their fingertips collections that are totally complete. And that will rival the major collections of the world and supersede them. And I think in terms of the broadening of culture, that's an incredibly powerful thing. So for me, it's a total revolution in how the general public can experience it. And also the other thing I'd say from that point of view is, museums, especially in Vienna, you really feel it, but the sort of power structures of architecture, and at least the opulence of Viennese museums, although I've been blown away by every single one I've been to, mean that only a certain set of our general public actually go and visit these items. But it's a very different world when you're sitting at home on your computer. You don't have to dress up smart. You don't have to leave your house. You don't have to talk to anyone or pretend you know anything. You can just Google and look. And I think that's also very powerful in terms of the broadening of artists' sort of cultural messaging.
Great. So from my perspective, I'm thinking about the agency that the NFT market gives to the artists that I work with. The fact that for the first time they get secondary market shares, which is really, really cool, I think, as long as we can figure out the problem of how to transfer them from platform to platform or blockchain to blockchain. I know we need to deal with that, but it is cool that they can get 10 to 15% or more every time their artwork is sold on the secondary market, so that's fantastic. Commission structures are starting to look different. This isn't necessarily like relevant for the public, but I think that it's something to mention as a curator who has gotten more into the sale of art because of NFTs and the pandemic. Looking at the original like 50-50 model is no longer something that is even a discussion when we do NFT drops. It's maybe 20 to 30% for the gallery or curator, and then whatever the platform fee is, and then the artist takes the rest and sets their secondary market share. And as a curator, I'm not profiting from that secondary market share, nor do I want to at this point, because that's not what it's about for me. I think also there's a lot more demand, and I work with a NFT platform marketplace, but also a platform that specializes in digital canvases that's been selling these custom digital canvases to digital art curious, collectors and like private homes, as well as commercial spaces for several years now. And because of NFTs, I'm working a lot with these different collectors and commercial spaces to mint different artworks and have them available on these public screens or private homes. And so we're seeing a lot more interest in the space, which I really didn't even bother with before the pandemic, because it just, ticketed experiences seemed, more lucrative for the artist. Getting commissions seemed better, especially for the digital artist, and it made more sense. So that would be my 2 cents on that.
Actually, the first point with the share the royalty which you get after, I think this is a really striking point. This is something which right now, when you see the primary and the secondary market or whatever, like in the traditional markets, somehow the artist is cut off of any, let's say, speculation of his or her work. So I think this is one of the most important issues. Yeah.
Do you want to say anything else about Jochen, maybe? The NFT is not changing the way you collect art. No.
The only thing I can say is, I have to, I also collecting, and I think for me it's interesting to have a very close connection to the painter, the artist, and also of the painting. And I think it's something very individual. It's something personal. And I think the problem with the electronic selling, I think it is, for me, it has nothing to do so much with painting. I think it's more or less, it's more a market, a new market, which is dominated by companies, and I think the danger I see is that a lot of manipulation could happen. So if people decide what is good or not good in the internet, I think then you have a mainstream, and I don't like mainstream. So I think it's for me a danger. And it's no matter what paintings. I think I wish that one time we have a more creative. How can I say? I'm sorry, my English is so bad. I think we how can I say? I wish that there is more creativity in the internet. Not only a lot of information, but I think we didn't reach the point now.
Can I just respond to the idea of dangers in the NFT world, creativity on the internet? I don't know where you're hanging out on the internet, but the internet is the most creative place in the world, by far. People from all over the world are being drawn not just to the internet to kind of discuss, self-organize, and educate themselves, and also produce culture, but they are meeting much larger audiences. I mean, this will be delivered online too, but in the grand scheme of things, this is a small audience with a small viewership. Online in the NFT space, the public is an order of magnitude larger, and also the creativity is an order of magnitude faster. If you miss one day in the NFT space, you feels like you've missed a decade of traditional art history. The pace of change is so radically innovative that even someone who's been there since 2016 still feels like they're behind, and is still trying to catch up. And I think the issue with danger and the market and speculation is an obvious and pressing one. I don't think, again, it's any different to what you see in the day and evening sales in contemporary art at any of the major auction houses, where speculation is also rife. But I also think it depends on what your point of view of art history is. For me, the trends of the day and whether things are moving or not moving, or are hot or not, are less interesting than thinking about what will be important in 20 or 30 years' time. And as with everything, I think if you take that kind of timeline, then the good will rise to the top and the bad will fall away. And so I think that's been a process of art history, the constant kind of classification and declassification of what is of value or not, has been a process that evolves very slowly. And I don't think that will be any different in the NFT space. So I think we should celebrate all these dangers that we see. We should celebrate all the innovation. We should ask as many people to come along, and we should see as much creativity in that space, because something will stick and 99% of it won't. But that's the same in any other place of cultural production. It's no different.
Yeah, I feel generally there is like, for me, I mean, I can follow your thoughts, I'm with you. From my point of view, when I, for instance, like if I have a work of art, which is, of course, let's say, which is analog, which is there in front of me, I can experience it. If I see it, let's say, through another medium, then of course it's kind of, it impacts me differently. So for instance, a painting, I have to be in front. A digital work, a video work, I can see also like in small, but for instance, like if it's presented in a cinema context, then I can breathe in, I can. And we are speaking now about digital or analog, it doesn't matter because it's just a medium. All of them, it needs its own framework. Now, if we have the market of NFTs, that's of course, this is another format. And how to translate this air in between, or the size, it's more the size, it's more the consumption of images. When an image is a document and when an image becomes an artwork. And it's not about judging. It's just that if we speak now about the traditional artwork, and they all try now to catch up with the techno guys and girls, you know. So yeah, what is now? What will happen now? I think this is something very striking, I would say, because for me, the format, it's, I mean, let's say this in between the artwork and the spectator or observer, or however you call it, it needs a certain medium. It's air in most cases. Sometimes it's also like the digital way. I mean, like if you, I mean, there is always a distance. Even if you look at a smartphone, there is air in between. So this is what we have to think of if we speak about art consumption and different kinds of markets. And even the art market, which we know until now, is just one solution. And also the museum structure, everything is just one power structure. Maybe if there would be another one, we could have maybe an alternative, which we don't have. In case of capitalist society, sorry.
There's one thing I just want to say in regards to consumption and like the fast pace, just churning of the NFT artwork that is constantly being dropped on various platforms, is that we also have to look at like the future of collectors and look at the younger generation and how they consume art and content. And having come from like a big social media background and content background, I think that there is space for this, and if we can figure out how to get the display, you know, proof of concept correct, then you know, there might be something to it, because Gen Zs are hungry for constant stimulation, and so that's what the next group of adults will be, and so I think that's where everything's going. Just to say, I'm not sure if that's what you were saying or not, but I wanted to pipe in.
But sure. Any new generation finds its own tools, and you know, is kind of and flourished about the new coming issues. Of course, that's how community is going on. You know, that's why we always think that. I mean, we are still in a kind of a modernistic era. I feel that the faster the better, and so on. But what did I want to say is like. This was like the no. I just excuse me. We started with the no. I lost my thoughts. It will come back. But,
I think the only thing to say in terms of size, viewing, and how NFTs are consumed visually is to say that the last 30 years we've had a history of art that was geared around, it was almost architecture was first and then art came second. So we had the establishment of the white cube, and then we had art that was made to fill that. Weirdly, like the blockchain should have really been invented in like 20 or 30 years time, because then we would have a metaverse. And in a metaverse context, that's where NFTs will suddenly make a lot of sense. And so when you see the worlds that like Mark Zuckerberg is painting with his new company, Meta, you'll start to get an understanding of where exactly these art objects will fit into. Now, hopefully they won't be in somewhere owned by Facebook, but they may be in worlds similar to that. And then at that point, the exhibition display of these NFTs starts to become radically interesting, because again, they live on free, permissionless platforms where anyone with an internet connection can go and look at this cultural production in a way that you can't do that if you're going to go onto MoMA's website or the Tate's website, where still in 2021, half of their websites are not digitized, and you go and look at the object, it says image not available. And so in some ways the blockchain and NFTs was invented maybe a bit ahead of its time, and I think that's what makes it really interesting now, is that we are collecting the future to an extent, and I think also over time you have to bet on technology, which is to say that right now, you know, file sizes, image quality, all these things are quite low. But in technology, there's something called Moore's Law, which means every 4 years things double in speed. So you can expect to see over time not just gigabyte files, but terabyte files of visual experience being uploaded into the metaverse for probably some of the most visually rich aesthetic experiences we're ever going to have.
Thank you. On that note, I also want to segue to the other topic we wanted to talk about, because it's not just like technologies that changed so rapidly in the last 2 years, but also we experienced social movements, Black Lives Matter, Me Too, still going on, the Corona crisis, and also the climate change, which Louise, you've already touched upon. And we also in the exhibition the exhibition also talks a lot about these current issues. So I was just wondering if you also want to say something about these issues and how they might have influenced your work in the last 2 years, especially also in terms of equality and inclusion in the art world. And yeah, I just was wondering about your opinion on that.
I already touched on it, so
I mean, I don't want to bring it back to NFTs every time, but that's all I know. I think in terms of space and coronavirus, it comes to no surprise that we're witnessing a real reevaluation of digital art in general, not just NFTs. But I think when people were locked in physically, they began to adventure online further and further, and they realized that actually there was this there are a lot of different bees nests of cultural production that exists online, and I think that will be a fundamental shift in terms of our perception of digital culture, that I think will never go back to a time before where digital art in general was seen as the kind of really the poor man's cousin to painting and sculpture, and I think that has been something that has been meaning to change for, digital art has existed since the 70s and the birth of video art, or even the 60s, and so it's been amazing to see that it took a global pandemic for people to really start to reevaluate that on I think on a broader public level, rather than just within the kind of insular groups of curators and critics that understand this history. So for me, that's probably the biggest takeaway of how COVID has specifically changed what we look at.
So accessibility has always been a huge part of my mission, and I've always been super cognizant of gender, and I look to diversify programs that I'm working on. I think any of the partners that I work with also do the same. I really admire the Mint Fund and what they're doing for artists in non-English speaking countries, helping to provide funds to mint the art so that they have the ability to get on the blockchain, to have NFTs available for collectors. So I think that's exciting. And then again, the partner that I tend to work with in the UK, Her Visions, who again is working with a lot of female identifying artists and non-binary and just anyone who is not always put first. So I think that it's important to bring together these different communities and work together to create a better future, so that this isn't something that we have to, point out constantly, because this shouldn't be happening. It's 2021. So yeah, that's what I'll say.
In sense of the climate change, we have also to consider the sustainability of the system of the NFT kind of energy sucking engine now, which probably now needs new tools to endeavor a kind of a low energy structure. Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I think it's an issue. Again, I think that blockchain came 20 years too early, and I think, unfortunately, we live in a world where there still is a large amount of carbon fossil fuels used to create energy, and now we have something like a blockchain, or at least proof of work blockchains that use a huge amount of energy. I don't think when people say, blockchains use too much energy, I think that's wrong, because I think throughout history, the history of civilization is basically the history of using more energy. We've never gone to a period of using less energy. We've just gone to a period of being more efficient of how we get that energy. And I think that if you look, there are several different studies, but if you look at some of the studies around energy in the blockchain, and some of the more qualified ones, I think it's something like 37% of the Ethereum network. The figures range for anywhere from between 20 and 60, but I think the most sensible figures are around the middle, about 37%, and uses fossil fuels. And if you compare that to other G7 countries, Ethereum is very green. And that's not to whitewash it at all, but to say that it exists within existing energy structures, and it's doing remarkably well. And it's soon to move to something called proof of stake, and that will really reduce the energy by over sort of 95%. Of course, Bitcoin is still very energy intensive. And I don't think it will ever change, but I also don't see that as a problem. And I think that what you'll see with crypto in general is that it will actually be a major driver of energy transformation, because people who mine cryptocurrency, they only care about getting the lowest possible price for their energy. They don't care where it comes from, and they can go wherever they like. And so it's starting to happen now where solar power and wind energy and hydroelectric and hydrothermal, is now much cheaper than coal and gas, and therefore Bitcoiners are just moving to that because it's cheapest and they can do it. Bitcoin is the first energy independent use, is the first location independent use of energy in the world. Previously, any use of energy had to be close to a city, it had to be close to a power line, and it was limited in time and space. But all you need with crypto is an internet connection, and you can get that anywhere. So you'll start to see, Bitcoin hydroelectric dams in the Arctic. You'll start to see solar farms in the Sahara that don't need to be close to any form of civilization. And that will drive revenue, which will therefore drive bigger uses of renewables. And I think over time, crypto may seem to be one of those drivers for the increasing kind of greenification of the grid. That's my view.
Gregor, you want to say something, Jochen?
Just remember now what I wanted to say, but it doesn't matter. So
No, it's okay.
the quality, the thing, they use, like if in front of a painting, it's not good because it's a painting.
Yes.
It has not its value because it's a painting. There is some criteria. The same will be probably like in the new technology issues. There is going to be now some, let's say, experts or viewers or filters to find out which kind of imagery is kind of preferable within a certain structure, like of audience or so-called community, which is not a nice word, but I'm just using it.
No, agreed. There's actually a token being created called Heat Token that will allow curators and experts to apply heat to artwork and across various platforms, so that you can understand that it's verified and approved by a certain group of people. So that's kind of cool. I think a lot of different, the Well is working on this one, but there's going to be a lot of that coming up soon.
Yes, thank you. I think we've already touched upon many topics, and I was wondering if there are questions from the audience. It looks like there's something coming, but no.
For me, the easiest video, I think Jess, you mentioned and others, who is deciding what is artistic value and monetary value? I'm really not an expert on NFT art, etc. Of course, as video art, photography art, all came up throughout the last decades as justifiable, equal, high level art. I think NFT and start with rise at the same time. But this kind of gatekeeping, today the Louvre, and you mentioned this big French galleries are doing, who will be the gatekeeper and this kind of digital media. And that will be very interesting also what you mentioned. What remains from the 1% that will make art history. Also, I think this is now totally limbo. This crisis, this kind of crisis for me is just a massive speculation. There's many money, and 1% has been made of art. And so for me personally, for example, I think also like Jochen, I would just sit back and look observe instead of jumping right in. But it would certainly be interesting if just you as a career of digital art, you could be the next, the new Gagosian of digital art, or if Gagosian and others with all their power, will at the end, like a Koenig is doing now, jump on board, and then again filter and decide. Is it really democratic? Is it really democratizing the art? Or is it again some white male guys that decide on the name? You're not old enough.
I still,
These are interesting.
Color doesn't matter.
I'm still white and male.
money.
I think from that point of view, it is. I mean, there are so many things to say there. I think one of the issues of the NFT space is it is still perpetuating a lot of the same gender and diversity stereotypes that we've seen in the traditional art world. I think that's a real problem. I think there are some great seeds of programming and people that are really fighting to make it a more diverse and equal place. And again, I'm a kind of big believer in free markets and kind of liberalism. So I think over time we'll see something that moves towards just quality rather than something that is perpetuating the same kind of power stereotypes. The only thing I'd like to say is that I think people are looking at the NFT world and they're thinking of it exactly the same way as the traditional art world. But I think they're very different places, and I think actually people are surprised by that and scared of it. Because in the traditional art world, there's a very few, the amount of artists and the amount of galleries in that space is very small. It's tiny, and outside of it, there exists, a huge spectrum of artists that have studios and open studios, and maybe go and do, pay places to have their work exhibited. And the NFT space actually, in some ways, caters more towards them than it does to the traditional artist in some way, because it's allowed them to find a market, and it's allowed them to find sort of financial independence. And I actually think that the headline artist in the NFT space comes from there. That's Beeple. Beeple was a kind of digital craftsman. He was making advertising features, and he was doing fashion shows, and he was doing special effects for movies. He wouldn't have called himself an artist 2 years ago. And so it's really interesting to see that that group of people who have built audiences up over time suddenly are able to really kind of develop a market for their own work, and have their craft, and that's the other word that I think is missed out. No. Yeah. It's the idea is like, it's madness that I would ever give 50% of any artwork away to a dealer. It's just, and it's also not needed anymore. Yeah.
It's very different experience, and also community building and bringing people together with different point of view. I think that will still not be possible.
No, I think you're completely right. I just think that if you...
It's like a chess approach. We have this city exploration through digital art, where you still have to go around and then explore the art within the city. In a long, hybrid way.
Yeah, it was a great exhibition and show. I remember seeing it. I think these are, I mean, again, it just caters to different things. I think that if you're a kid really interested in art and you live in a small town in India, having the NFT space is like an amazing thing for you because you can participate. I think at the same time, if you're really interested in art and you live in, you're lucky to live in a major art capital, then you can also participate in a different way. But that, I think, is actually a privilege in some senses.
But then maybe you can't see, if you're in a privileged space, you can't see great Indian art on the other side of the globe.
Of course, but I feel like in the NFT space, everybody can see everything.
Yeah, sure. No, just speaking about where is the center, definitely in the traditional world.
Jason Bailey is making a Google for NFTs right now.
Yeah.
Using what?
He's making a Google for NFTs.
Oh, cool.
So you can oh yeah. Sorry.
So we'll have a Google for NFTs soon.
Yeah.
That's in the making apparently.
Among other things that are happening.
Yes. So I think everyone is really getting very cold here.
May I have one last question?
Please.
Because Luis, you had not enough talking time.
No, actually, I prepared because I just jumped onto the onto this because one person, and I prepared
About the
for
and
about,
because I think it's also still important to talk about equality and diversity and inclusivity.
talk about the cultural sector and the budget part.
Yes. Oh, that's good.
Can you take the microphone? Otherwise, we cannot hear you.
Okay. Yeah, and now because I have a loud enough voice anyway. Yeah. So, and now, okay. So shall I?
Please.
Yeah. Well, mine was also to answer to or speak to the question about Julia's question on the many regions of the world, especially the cultural sector, which was last or least to receive relief, and how to effectively lobby governments and others to recognize the importance of the sector, the art and the cultural sector. So mine was, first of all, to look at the importance of arts in the society. And I'm sure you must agree with me, especially for you guys who are also really thinking of the traditional way of, conveying art. As art, through art, people are encouraged to imagine other possibility, other possible responses, including possible futures. What does that mean? It means that art is an instrument upon which we can uplift humanity consciousness and wake up and jolt us out of our comfort zone and move us forward towards thinking outside the box. Art has always had the ability to communicate, something like what you said, Robert, to communicate a deeper meaning to existence through creative thinking and creative expression, which is our innate human ability. And it is through art that we can begin to acknowledge that we are all connected and there is no separation between the human being, the environment, and the whole of existence. And it's through art that we are able to learn that everything is interconnected. However, when we look at politics today, whether you're in Austria, Uganda, or anywhere in the world, we are forced to question the power structures, especially the political landscape and our governments. Many of our politicians endorse policies that would enable them to occupy office for a certain period of time. However, when we look at others want to be in office forever when we look at dictatorship. So I'm talking from a point of view of someone who works between Vienna and Africa. So they listen mainly to scientific solutions and strategies, like I mentioned earlier, to find answers to challenges that face the public currently. We are looking at the pandemic. They have put so much emphasis on values that no longer serve the people, such that as the capitalistic way of thinking, with science and technology being the new religion. Governments are encouraged to invest heavily on scientific research and innovation in order to find sustainable solutions for human issues, with art and culture being the least important, meaning that when there's budget allocation, the sector is not considered a priority. And that is a fact that we have to acknowledge. In Uganda, for example, the other day, the Minister for Education announced that all teachers would receive pay rise apart from art teachers, because art education does not improve on the livelihood and growth of youth. By the way, these charters are not endorsed locally. They are also not endorsed on a national level. They're mainly agreed upon by member states, and then the member states are required to implement them in their countries. So in my opinion, as an artist who actually works on the topic of uplifting humanity consciousness with a big goal, because I have an art and education center in Uganda, I work with young people who were heavily affected by armed conflict in northern Uganda, the LRA war that lasted for more than 20 years. We have a population of about 7 million, and more than 70% of our population are young people who are under the age of 35. So you can imagine such policies whereby even in this region there's no art university at all. So my vision is actually to build an art university in this region. So it's like the question answered what we can do. So my personal opinion is for all actors to come together through networking, cooperation, and partnerships, inviting participation for those whose voice need to be heard. and together support each other in giving support to independent art spaces, such as VBKO, the organization that I'm one of the co-presidents, and Julia is also one of the active members. You know that our organization actually amplifies the feminist, the queer feminist agenda. So mine is to also voice this, that we have little or no access to funding. So in other words, it's important for organizations or individuals like yours to support us in resource mobilization, so that we may be able to continue with what we do through artistic practices. As you all know, that art has a way to move people, to make people grieve together, to have faith, to be motivated and inspired, to have courage, to absorb, process, and integrate the meaning of issues such as climate change, gender inequalities, racism, the impact of the pandemic in our lives, and the list goes on and on. So through art, we can come together, like what Robert said, and we are able to motivate each other into creating outcomes that can inspire us to transform the world and make it intriguing and dynamic despite the challenges. Actually, that's what I wanted to add.
Thank you. I think these are the perfect closing words. We also have one more question from the audience.
That's why I think decentralized autonomous organizations are so important. Because from my point of view, I have the first time the opinion that I can get decentralized people together. They can make decision making together. This is democracy. I don't know in English, but I think that's
Democracy.
why it's so important. I have the own values like you in art, and I don't care about NFTs when it comes to say, let's do a picture and get value. But if we think that we can work together and then we can make value together, we can set up rules with smart contracts, how we want to work together, how we want to sell our art. This is really a solution for me as a social worker, as a community worker, as an artist. And that's why it's so important for me that we can not say, oh, there's so much shit happening with the NFT scene, to say what are the possibilities for the future. I see them, you see them, and you see them, we should see them too.
Thank you. This is a good positive note to end this talk, I think. I want to thank you all for participating and sitting here in the cold. Thank you for watching and listening to us. And yeah, I hope you are still enjoying the show until 7, and then we say goodbye. Thank you.